The most extreme Jesuit spy in history is caught and imprisoned by the Soviets. Meanwhile, the Pope is a secret traitor, and Fish on Fridays was a scheme so crazy you might not believe it. The secret Jesuit spy. If you think your job is tough, imagine being a Jesuit priest in Soviet Russia in the middle of Stalin's reign. That was the reality for Father Walter Zizek, an American Jesuit whose life story reads like an action movie. Fake identities, secret missions, Soviet prisons, labor camps, and an international spy-level prisoner exchange negotiated by none other than President John F. Kennedy. Oh, and did I mention that for years people back home assumed he was dead? Father Zizek spent 23 years behind the Iron Curtain, much of it doing forced labor in Siberia. But through it all, he never stopped serving others or keeping the faith. It's no wonder his canonization case was officially opened in 2012. Born in 1904 in Shenandoah, Pennsylvania, Zizek joined the Jesuits in 1928. After being ordained in 1937, Zizek was assigned to Poland. Then, when World War II broke out in 1939, he saw his chance to convert the Soviets. He grabbed some false identification papers and slipped into Russia disguised as an unskilled laborer. If you've ever had a bad travel experience, you can rest assured that you at least didn't end up in the Gulag. But Father Zizek did. He was arrested by Soviet secret police and accused of being a Vatican spy in 1941. The KGB threw him into Lubyanka prison in Moscow, where he spent 5 years being interrogated. For some wild reason, the Soviets really wanted to know what priests were up to. Then came the fun part. After years of interrogation, the priest was condemned to 15 years of hard labor in a Siberian gulag. Think of the worst job you've ever had, then multiply it by frostbite and starvation. Despite brutal conditions, Zizek didn't stop being a priest. He found ways to hear confessions, celebrate Mass in secret, and bring comfort to his fellow prisoners. While some people were just trying to survive, he was out there making sure others could hold on to their faith. In 1955, Zizek's sentence was cut short because he worked too hard. Seriously, what? Who gets released from being a slave because they're such a good slave? He exceeded his labor quotas, and instead of sending him home, the Soviets forced him to live in a remote city where he worked in a chemical factory. At this point, his family in the US still assumed he was long gone. Then, after 20 years, they received a letter from him out of the blue. How do you think they reacted to that? Even free Zizek wasn't really free. He couldn't go home until 1963, when President Kennedy personally negotiated his release as part of a Cold War prisoner swap. Way to go, JFK! Zizek returned to the US a living legend. He spent the rest of his life teaching, writing, and inspiring others at Fordham University until his death in 1984. His books, With God in Russia and He Leadeth Me, are still must-reads for anyone thinking about faith under pressure. Would you survive 15 years in a Siberian gulag? The religion of Homo erectus. Joe the caveman may have had his own religion tens of thousands of years before Christ. But wait a second, does that mean cave people all went to hell since they weren't baptized and knew nothing of Christianity? That's quite the ethical conundrum to consider. Religion is everywhere. From megachurches to tiny shrines in the middle of nowhere, humans love to believe in something bigger than themselves. But when did it all start? Scientists have been scratching their heads over this for a while. They know modern religion didn't just pop into existence like a bad internet trend. It had to come from somewhere. And if you follow that logic, then Homo sapiens probably didn't invent it from scratch. New research shows that religion likely evolved over time, just like language, fire-making, and our ability to be irrationally angry at inanimate objects. French sociologist Émile Durkheim, a big brain in this area, argued that religion started as a social experience, something people did together to feel connected. His definition of religion includes 5 key factors. You have unified beliefs, rituals, sacred objects, moral communities, and the feeling of something bigger than yourself. With these 5 factors, you have religion. By this definition, if Homo erectus had rituals, shared beliefs, and some sort of moral code, then they might have had the prehistoric equivalent of a church. Did Homo erectus really have a higher power? Alright, let's rewind the clock by about 1.5 million years. Homo erectus was roaming the earth, doing its thing, and not once checking its phone. Archaeologists haven't found any ancient prayer books, but they have found some pretty weird stuff that suggests Homo erectus was getting into some form of ritualistic behavior. For example, in Java, Indonesia, scientists found skulls that had been deliberately tampered with. Specifically, the brain cases had been opened up. Unless Homo erectus was into extreme DIY skull modifications, this suggests some kind of ritual, possibly involving cannibalism. Was it religious? Was it just a really weird dinner party? Hard to say, but it definitely wasn't random. Since there was no stone tablets or sacred texts back then, scientists have to make some educated guesses. Based on what they know about ancient religions, Homo erectus may have either had polytheism, meaning they worshipped many gods, or they may have practiced shamanism, eating trippy mushrooms to connect with the spirit world. Here's a juicy little factoid to freak your friends out. For years, archaeologists thought Homo erectus worshipped bears. Why? Because they found bear bones arranged in caves. The theory was that early humans held ceremonies for their fuzzy overlords. Then in the 1970s, scientists ruined the fun and figured out that sediment shifts probably moved the bones naturally. But it still doesn't rule out the original god being an adorable black bear. Even more amazing is that there's solid evidence that later humans picked up religious habits from Homo erectus. Things like engraved shells that could have had religious symbolism, Venus figures that may have been religious icons, and collections of red pigment possibly used in rituals. So, did Homo erectus have religion, and since it was obviously pagan, are all of humanity's ancestors currently burning in the sixth circle of hell? That's too heavy for me to answer. Let me know your opinion in the comments. And now for a quick break, but first I wanted to give a shout out and big thank you to Mana and Hannah Flint for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The insanity of the phantom time hypothesis. Everything you thought you knew about time is false, at least according to the phantom time hypothesis, which claims the Catholic Church faked 300 years of history. If the phantom time hypothesis is true, it means we aren't currently living in the 21st century. Humanity is still in the 1700s. 300 years of history from 614 to 911 AD never happened. All the events of those years during a period known as the Dark Ages were fabricated by medieval elites who wanted to mess with the calendar. Sounds ridiculous, right? But that didn't stop German historian Herbert Illich from proposing the theory. Herbert claimed that Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and possibly Byzantine Emperor Constantine VIII conspired to rewrite time itself. Why pull off such a charade? Because they wanted to rule in the year 1000, which seemed special, so they tweaked time. The issue with this theory is that it totally changes history. It would mean some of the biggest events in medieval history never happened. No Charlemagne, no Viking raids on England, no Muslim conquest of Spain. Just a giant elaborate hoax pulled off by a few medieval guys with way too much time on their hands. Archaeological and historical evidence unanimously debunks the theory. Yet that doesn't stop people from supporting it, even today. Putting aside all the obvious wrongs, let's focus on the stars. If history had been artificially inflated by 297 years, we'd see major discrepancies in astronomical records. Ancient civilizations kept detailed logs of solar eclipses, planetary movements, and other celestial events. For example, the Romans recorded a solar eclipse in 59 AD, and modern astronomers have verified that it happened exactly when they said it did. If 300 years had been randomly inserted into history, these events wouldn't match up with our current models of how the universe works. If the Church didn't make up history, why do people still believe? While the phantom time hypothesis is entertaining, it's also a perfect example of how conspiracy theories work. David Heyman, an independent researcher of alternative histories, said, "These claims really can't be supported. Illich is just stirring the pot, and here we are discussing it, so I guess he's doing well there." And that's the thing. Bad history sells. People love the idea that everything we've been told is a lie, and that they've uncovered some hidden truth that experts refuse to acknowledge. As fun as it is to imagine Otto III and Pope Sylvester II laughing in their castles as they trick future generations into believing in fake centuries, the phantom time hypothesis is completely debunked by astronomy, archaeology, and common sense. Sorry, conspiracy theorists, better luck next time. Then again, maybe I'm wrong. Astronomy is a farce, and the Church really did dream up 300 years of fake history. If you know the truth, sound off in the comments. The Pope who started the slave trade. History is full of bad decisions, but few have had the lasting, world-altering consequences of Pope Nicholas V's stamp of approval on the Portuguese slave trade. Remember that awful period in history where human beings were traded like cattle? Yeah, blame the Pope for that one. In the mid-15th century, as Portugal expanded into West Africa, a bunch of ambitious sailors, greedy merchants, and one enthusiastic pope laid the groundwork for the transatlantic slave trade. In 1441, Portuguese captain Antão Gonçalves sailed to West Africa hoping to stock up on sealskins and oil, hopefully to sell and not to oil himself up and wear. But after securing his goods, Gonçalves had a brilliant idea. You know what would be really profitable, he asked his crew, if we started capturing people and selling them? I'm dead serious. He and his crew kidnapped 2 unsuspecting Berbers from the Carte Blanche Peninsula in modern-day Mauritania. Soon, Portugal had its first batch of human cargo. The numbers were small at first, less than a dozen captives, but it was enough to convince Prince Henry of Portugal that they were onto something big. When Gonçalves returned to Portugal, he made a deal with the 2 Berber captives. They promised to trade 10 sub-Saharan Africans for their own freedom. And just like that, the slave trade began. You might be wondering how Portugal got away with trading human people. The legal and moral questions about enslavement were a bit fuzzy back then. Medieval Iberian law already had rules about enslaving Muslims, Jews, and Christians, but there were no rules against people who didn't fit into those categories. In came Pope Nicholas V, who in 1452 and 1455 issued papal bulls that explicitly gave Portugal the right to enslave non-Christians. In his 1455 bull, Romanus Pontifex, Nicholas V wrote, "Invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and reduce their persons to perpetual slavery." Translation in modern English is, "Go ahead, Portugal, conquer and enslave whoever you want, just as long as they aren't Christian." The Portuguese slave trade was going to continue whether the Pope agreed or not, but getting the blessing of the Pope made things so much worse. The Pope turned human trafficking into a divine mission. It wasn't just business anymore. The Pope made it like a quest. Good Christians were encouraged to enslave non-Christians. Portugal didn't keep the slave trade to itself for long. Soon, Spain, France, England, and the Netherlands all jumped in. Within a few centuries, the transatlantic slave trade became one of the largest forced migrations in history. Ironically, the same papal bull that justified enslaving Africans also gave Christianized Africans a legal loophole. The Kingdom of Congo, for example, converted to Christianity in the late 1400s and started sending diplomatic envoys to Europe. By the 1520s, Congo's ruler was using Christianity as a bargaining chip to limit Portuguese slave trading in his kingdom. Now that's playing 4D chess. Be Christian or be a slave? I think most would submit to Sunday service if given the choice between the two. History often asks us to grapple with uncomfortable truths, and this is one of them. Pope Nicholas V's decision to greenlight the enslavement of Africans helped create a system of suffering that lasted for centuries. And all because one Portuguese captain thought, hey, what if we kidnapped people? The controversy of the golden calf worship site. If there's one thing humans have always been good at, it's making bad decisions under pressure. Like that one time Moses went for a walk and everyone started worshipping a baby cow. Wait, you missed that part of the Bible? Let me hook you up with a recap. According to the book of Exodus, Moses left his people alone for a hot minute. Okay, it was actually 40 days. He left to go have a chat with God on Mount Sinai. Instead of waiting patiently, his followers got bored, panicked, and created a new god for themselves. They pressured Aaron, Moses' brother, into making a golden calf to worship, thus breaking the first 2 commandments. But why a golden calf? Scholars believe the Israelites had a brief nostalgic moment for Egyptian bull gods like Apis and Hathor. Maybe you've heard of Egypt's Serapeum of Saqqara, filled with giant sarcophagi used to bury the holy Apis bulls. The Israelites definitely knew about them. Once Moses left the room, they were like kids going for the cookie jar, instantly making a false idol based on the Apis bull god. And get this, Exodus chapter 32 verse 4 records that the Israelites didn't just say, "This is your God." They went hardcore over this thing, saying, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." They built a big flashy altar in front of the golden calf. They had a full-on worship festival with burnt offerings, feasting, and dancing, as is written in Exodus chapter 32, verse 6. The Apostle Paul later wrote that things got real wild, including sexual immorality. I'll let you take a look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 7 to 8, and draw your own conclusions on what the heck the Israelites were doing. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai, the scene looked less like a holy gathering and more like a rowdy music festival gone horribly wrong. He reacted violently. Moses smashed the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments and melted the golden calf, ground it into powder, and made everyone drink it. Moses had a fit. He was like, "You want to worship a gold cow? Then you can drink the gold cow." Then he ordered the execution of 3,000 people. And if that wasn't punishment enough, another 20,000 people died from a plague. That's the story, but what I want to talk about is its validity. Did this really happen? Can the golden calf worship site be found? Archaeologists have amazingly discovered a potential site near the holy mountain Jabal Machla, believed to be the real Mount Sinai in the Bible. There are dozens of bull petroglyphs, including one of a dude literally lifting a bull above his head like it's Simba. Researchers found a pile of large rocks, possibly an altar site. And most suspiciously of all, after the discovery was made, the Saudi government showed up and erected a security fence. I can't think of anything more sus than a security fence at what might be the actual site of forbidden idol worship. What's your takeaway from this bizarre story? Was the golden calf debacle real, or is it just a cautionary tale of how quickly people become sheep? The Vatican's secret spy network. When I think about the Vatican, the first thing that comes to mind definitely isn't priests training like James Bond. But lo and behold, that's kind of what's been happening for a long time. Behind those ancient walls, there's a secret world of espionage, covert operations, and priests trained to parachute into enemy territory. Catholic priests are secretly being trained in combat, firearms, and skydiving. Vatican espionage isn't just about whispering confessions, it's about dodging KGB agents, infiltrating the USSR, and helping a Polish priest become pope and take down communism. Whoa, that just escalated a lot. Let me back things up a bit. A new book called Vatican Spies by Yvonnik Denol pulls back the cassock on what's known as the Entity, the Vatican's secret intelligence agency that makes the Da Vinci Code look like child's play. Think MI6, but with rosary beads. This may come as a shock, but the Church has been in the spy business for centuries. In the 1500s, when Queen Elizabeth I of England was cracking down on Catholics, Pope Pius V thought the Church should do something about it. Thus was born the Holy Alliance, the Vatican's first official spy agency. They gathered intelligence and ran covert ops across Europe. Moving ahead to the 20th century, things got way more intense. With communism rising and fascism lurking, the Vatican wasn't just watching the world burn. They were actively sending priests into danger zones to gather intel, like our old Jesuit buddy Father Walter Zizek. When the Cold War happened, the Vatican's secret spy network became an unofficial branch of Western intelligence. The Vatican realized that taking down communism was priority number one, so they created Russicum, a top-secret Vatican spy program that turned priests into action heroes. According to declassified reports, priests were trained in hand-to-hand combat, given firearms training, and taught how to jump out of planes and parachute into Soviet-controlled territory. Just in case you were wondering if this is an exaggeration, it isn't. Dozens of priests were dropped into the Soviet Union in the late 1940s and early 50s. The CIA even helped forge their IDs. One of Russicum's most secret operations was to help a Polish priest named Karol Wojtyła rise through the ranks and become Pope John Paul II. Born and ordained in secret in communist Poland, Wojtyła was exactly what the Vatican needed. A man who hated communism, loved the Church, and wasn't afraid to take risks. When he became the first non-Italian pope in 450 years in 1978, the KGB had a panic attack. John Paul II did not hold back. He openly supported Poland's anti-communist movement, gave speeches that sent Soviet leaders into a rage, and played a real-life game of chess against the USSR. Things got so intense that in 1981 an assassin shot him 4 times in broad daylight in St. Peter's Square. I bet you didn't know any of this. It's crazy, right? A secret spy program that made a communist-hating pope is movie material. Miraculously, he survived the shooting. It's thought the KGB may have ordered the hit. The thing to know is that the Vatican is a spy paradise. According to former Polish spy Tomasz Torowski, during John Paul II's reign, there were more spies in the Vatican than in James Bond films. Why? Because the Vatican is a gold mine for intelligence. It's neutral territory, so diplomats, world leaders, and shady characters are always passing through. Priests travel everywhere, making them perfect informants in unstable regions. It even has its own secret police called the Vigilanza, who bug phones, monitor mail, and investigate threats. I guess this takes don't trust a priest to the next level. Hey, if you're enjoying the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Fish on Friday, it's all lies. This next story has everything you could ever want. Powerful rulers and enough fish to make Poseidon jealous. Have you ever thought that Christian theology and the fillet of fish from McDonald's might be related? Surprise, they are. Here's the deal with fish and Christians. Jesus died on a Friday, and early Christians commemorated the day by fasting. The rule was no meat from warm-blooded animals because these creatures had sacrificed their lives for humans. Fish, however, got a free pass. This is the reason behind Christians only eating fish on Friday. But I suppose you could eat reptiles too, since they're also cold-blooded. As the Christian calendar expanded with more and more meatless days, Fridays, Wednesdays, Saturdays, Advent, Lent, and any time someone looked at a saint the wrong way, the demand for fish skyrocketed. At first, medieval Christians made do with herring, a fish that was easy to catch but about as appetizing as chewing on a damp sponge. The real game changer was cod. It was tasty, cured well, and lasted longer than most medieval monarchs. The Vikings happened to be masters at preserving cod, using it as a kind of medieval beef jerky on their voyages. Now here's a little piece of forgotten history. It's possible that cod was the real reason European explorers started pushing westward. Long before Columbus or John Cabot, English fishermen from Bristol may have secretly made their way to Newfoundland in search of prime cod fishing waters. America was nothing but a sweet fishing spot. In the 1500s, fish was dominating European menus. In England, the never-ending fish diet was so unbearable that one poor 15th century schoolboy scrawled in his notebook, "You will not believe how weary I am of fish, and how much I desire meat to return again." Sounds like a fresh vegetarian. Then along came Henry VIII, lover of women, destroyer of monasteries, and unexpected enemy of fish. When Henry fell head over heels for Anne Boleyn, he had a slight problem. He was already married, and the Pope wouldn't let him divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Henry did what any lovesick king would do. He broke away from the Catholic Church, founded the Church of England, and married Anne. Eating fish suddenly became a political act. Since fish had long been associated with Catholic fasting, English Protestants started shunning it. Fishmongers suffered so much that when Henry's son Edward VI took the throne, he passed a law requiring people to eat fish to save the industry. It was government-mandated fish consumption. For those of you with no grey hairs, you probably don't remember just how fishy things used to be. Pope Paul VI didn't relax the Friday meat ban until the 1960s. Up until 65 years ago, fish on Fridays was still huge in the Catholic world. When the Pope gave the official go-ahead to start meeting it up, the economic impact was immediate. US fish prices tanked and the industry panicked. One man saw an opportunity. In a largely Catholic part of Cincinnati, McDonald's franchise owner Lou Groen noticed that sales plummeted on Friday because customers were avoiding meat. His solution was the fillet of fish. It wasn't exactly the miracle of loaves and fishes, but it worked. The sandwich became a staple, helping keep McDonald's afloat on Fridays and proving that even fast food can have religious significance. The Pope's Nazi crime letter. Prepare for some whiplash as I go from talking about the post-World War II Pope who waged war against the communists to the Pope who secretly may have been a Nazi during World War II. History is full of awkward revelations, but few are as awkward as this. Newly discovered Vatican documents suggest Pope Pius XII knew exactly what the Nazis were up to during World War II, and much earlier than the Church ever admitted. For decades, the Vatican's official stance was that they couldn't speak out about Nazi war crimes because they didn't know about them. They were lying. New evidence proves that not only did they have the reports, but they had detailed written accounts from a trusted German Jesuit who was sending Vatican HQ a real-time news feed of Nazi atrocities. And where did the Vatican keep this bombshell document? Oh, you know, just stuffed in a random attic in plastic containers where heat and humidity were slowly destroying it. When it comes to handling sensitive historical evidence, the Vatican takes inspiration from your grandma's attic. What exactly was in this letter? On December 14, 1942, a German Jesuit priest named Lothar Koenig wrote to Pope Pius XII's secretary, Father Robert Lieber, with some pretty alarming information. The letter said that Nazis were murdering up to 6,000 Jews and Poles per day in occupied Poland. They were doing it in gas chambers and literal ovens. Also, it wasn't a rumor. Koenig was part of the Catholic anti-Nazi resistance and had inside sources. Lieber, who was Pius XII's right-hand man, would have absolutely brought this to the Pope's attention, which means the Vatican knew they were in on it. Historians have long debated whether Pope Pius XII was a silent hero or a passive bystander. His supporters claim he used quiet diplomacy to save Jewish lives. His critics say he failed to use his moral authority when it mattered most. This letter really complicates the Vatican's old excuse, because by the time Pius XII received it, he had already gotten multiple diplomatic reports about the Holocaust and was being begged to make a public statement. There's no other way to look at it. The Pope knew and said nothing. Now what? The Vatican is in a really awkward position. What do you think they should do going forward? Should Pope Pius XII be celebrated as a saint or condemned as a Nazi sympathizer? Beyond the Da Vinci Code. Move over Da Vinci Code. While Notre Dame is still getting its post-fire glow-up, Saint-Sulpice, Paris's second largest church, has been stepping into the spotlight. And thanks to Dan Brown, it's been saddled with more wild conspiracy theories than a late-night internet rabbit hole. Built in the 17th and 18th centuries, Saint-Sulpice was a relatively low-key Parisian church, up until Brown's 2003 blockbuster novel transformed it into a cryptic treasure hunt location for fans obsessed with the Holy Grail. Tour operators, never ones to miss a cash cow, jumped in. Even now, nearly 2 decades later, Da Vinci Code tours are still a thing. Clément Savary, an official Saint-Sulpice guide, is not a fan of the Da Vinci tours. He compared them to the Jack the Ripper tours of London, saying they're packed with nonsense. But just what exactly are these conspiracy-loving tourists looking for at Saint-Sulpice? One of the biggest tourist attractions is the Gnomon, an astronomical device built in 1727 to track the Earth's movements. It's a fancy sundial, but in the Da Vinci Code, Brown says it's part of a secret map linked to the Priory of Sion, a fake organization invented in the 1950s by a French prankster. Another Da Vinci Code-inspired misconception is the idea that Eugène Delacroix's painting titled Saint Michael Slaying the Dragon is a secret message from the last of the Knights Templar, cursing the French monarchy. According to some overly imaginative people, the dragon's iron crown symbolizes the doomed French king, and Saint Michael is actually a Templar avenger, bringing down the monarchy. Clément Savary says the painting is a very common Christian symbol. It's Saint Michael, killing a dragon, that's it. Beyond all the Da Vinci Code madness, Saint-Sulpice does have some fascinating real history. It's played host to major figures like Robespierre and Victor Hugo, and its hidden chapels contain stunning artwork and architectural gems. One of these, the Assumption Chapel, was built in the 18th century for the parish's poorest residents. Early morning masses were held here for those who couldn't afford the grand services in the main church. Today, it's closed to the public. Visitors willing to look beyond the Da Vinci Code mythology can arrange private tours to explore these hidden corners of Saint-Sulpice. And hey, who knows, maybe you'll spot something connected to a real-life secret organization. The Keeper of the Vatican's Secrets. For years, the Vatican has tried to shake off its reputation as a secret hoarding, Dan Brown novel-inspiring fortress of mysteries. They even went as far as renaming the Vatican Secret Archive to the more boring Vatican Apostolic Archive to sound less like the setting of a conspiracy thriller. Nice try, but let's be real. When you have dozens of miles of underground, fireproof, reinforced concrete shelves filled with centuries-old documents, people are going to assume you're hiding some wild stuff. I introduce you now to Archbishop Sergio Pagano, the guy who's been in charge of this treasure trove for the last 45 years. As he's preparing to retire, he's decided to spill the beans on some of the Vatican's lesser-known secrets in a new book-length interview titled Secretum, written with Italian journalist Massimo Franco. Grab some popcorn as the secrets are revealed, starting with Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1810, Napoleon looted the Vatican archives, shipping everything off to Paris. But one particularly clever Vatican archivist saw what was coming and decided to hide a rather important document, a 1530 letter from British nobles begging Pope Clement VII to let King Henry VIII dump his wife for Anne Boleyn. The archivist rolled it up, stuffed it inside a hidden drawer in a chair, and waited. Sure enough, the French never found it. That document remained hidden in the archives. Then there's the 1922 papal election, which almost didn't happen because the Vatican was dead broke. When Pope Benedict XV died, the cardinal in charge of the treasury opened the Vatican's safe and found nothing. Not a coin, not a banknote, not even an IOU. Benedict wasn't exactly a financial whiz, and the Vatican was in the red. Here's the secret. America came to the rescue. US Catholics scraped together every last cent they could find, sending a grand total of $210,400.09 to Rome. That money funded the conclave that elected Pope Pius X, the dude I told you about earlier who may have secretly been a Nazi. Way to go, America. And that's just the beginning. As more secrets of the archives are revealed, I'll be happily bringing them to you here on Origins Explained. Which church secret freaked you out the most? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.